The gate scanner rejected my boarding pass. My passport stayed in the agent's hand. The door to the jet bridge was already closing. The agent didn't apologize. She turned the screen so I could see a red band across my name and said I'd been pulled for secondary clearance. Secondary meant I wasn't going anywhere until someone else decided. My phone lost signal inside the glass corridor. Not dead. Throttled. Messages queued and wouldn't send. The departure board flipped to final call and then to departed. A uniformed officer walked up without urgency. He asked me to step aside and keep my bag open. He didn't touch it. He waited for a tablet to load. Waiting was the pattern. He told me my travel authorization had been suspended, not revoked. Suspended pending verification. Verification had no clock attached to it. I said I had a court appearance in the morning. Family court. Custody exchange. Missing it would count as noncompliance. He nodded like he'd heard that before and said he couldn't advise on consequences outside the airport. The tablet chimed. He scanned my passport again. A small printer spat out a receipt with a case number and a phone line that didn't accept calls until business hours. It was already evening. I asked what triggered it. He said an automated match. Similar identifiers. Could be a mistake. Mistakes get fixed once reviewed. My bag came back unopened. That felt worse. It meant they hadn't decided anything yet. I walked out to the curb. Rideshare apps spun and failed. My account showed limited functionality. Not banned. Limited. I hailed a cab. The driver asked for cash. I checked my wallet. Cards only. I called my sister from a pay phone. The call dropped twice before connecting. She said the school had already called. They'd been notified I wouldn't be arriving tomorrow. No explanation given. An email finally arrived when the signal flickered back. Subject line neutral. Travel status update. It said my profile was under review due to a data inconsistency tied to a closed matter from years ago. Closed didn't mean cleared. There was a link to upload documents. The link timed out twice. On the third try, it accepted my ID and returned a message saying additional verification was required in person. In person where wasn't specified. Another message followed. A reminder. Failure to appear at scheduled proceedings may result in adverse findings. I stood under the overhang watching cars pull away, holding a receipt with a number that didn't connect yet, knowing the system had already informed everyone else that I wouldn't make it. By morning, the suspension had spread beyond the airport. My banking app opened but wouldn't transfer funds. Temporary restriction, it said, with a link that looped back to the same screen. The cab ride home became a favor I couldn't repay yet. I checked the case number on the receipt at 8 sharp. The line accepted calls now. A recorded voice asked for patience and said reviews were handled in order of risk. Risk to whom wasn't specified. When a person finally came on, she sounded bored and precise. She said my profile was flagged due to a legacy record with overlapping identifiers. Overlapping meant close enough to matter. I asked how to clear it. She said upload proof of resolution or appear in person at a regional office. The nearest office was 3 hours away by car. I didn't have a car. She added something that sounded like relief. If the legacy record belonged to someone else, a supervisor could manually detach it. Manual meant human. Human meant possible. She scheduled a review window for the afternoon and told me to email documents ahead of time. I gathered what I had. Old court paperwork stamped closed. A letter from an employer confirming dates. A scan of my ID. I sent everything and watched the send icon stick before finally moving. At noon, she emailed back. Neutral tone. She confirmed receipt and said the materials supported a likely correction. Likely was enough to breathe. She said if approved, travel status could be restored within 24 hours. That window mattered. If I could fly tomorrow morning, I could still make court by afternoon. I messaged my ex through the app. Told her it looked fixable. She didn't reply, but the message didn't bounce. The escalation hid behind that hope. A new notice appeared in my inbox from the court system. Failure to confirm appearance. It wasn't a sanction yet. It was a warning. Warnings become findings when clocks run out. I refreshed the review portal. My case moved from queued to pending supervisor. That felt like progress. I paced. I charged my phone. I stayed near the outlet because the signal dipped if I moved. At 4:30, the supervisor emailed. One sentence. They needed additional verification tied to the closed matter. In person, I replied immediately asking where and when. No answer. At 5:58, another message landed. My review window had expired due to incomplete verification. A new window would be assigned. No date. I checked flights. All required clearance before booking now. The false sense of clearance collapsed quietly. I sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, watching the court deadline creep closer without anyone officially denying me anything. The new window didn't come. Something else did. At 7:30, my ex finally replied. Not to me. Through the app. She'd filed an emergency motion citing non-appearance risk. The system timestamped it before I could respond. An hour later, my phone rang. A clerk. Not hostile. She said the judge had issued a temporary order pending appearance. Temporary meant immediate. Pickup authority transferred until review. Review required physical presence. That reframed everything. This wasn't about a flight anymore. It was about time becoming evidence. I called the clearance line again. Different agent. I explained the court order. She listened and said the case was already escalated. Escalated meant it had wait. Wait meant slower. She said in-person verification was now mandatory due to downstream impact. I asked where. She gave me an address. Same regional office. 3 hours away. Appointment only. Next available slot was 2 days out. 2 days was enough to turn temporary into precedent. I asked if there was any alternative. She paused, then said there was an emergency desk at the airport. Not public, only accessible with a referral code. Referral codes came from supervisors. Supervisors required completed reviews. The loop closed cleanly. I tried the rideshare app again. Still limited. I tried to add a card. Declined. I tried a different app. Same result. My accounts hadn't been shut down. They'd been constrained just enough to prevent distance. Every block traced back to the same place. Not the airport, not the bank, not the court. A shared clearance registry that other systems queried before acting. If it showed red, nothing else mattered. It didn't decide outcomes. It decided who could move while decisions were being made. At 10:22, a new email arrived from the court. Hearing scheduled. Video attendance denied due to custody implications. Physical presence required. I walked to the bus station with a backpack and cash I borrowed from my sister. The clerk scanned my ID and frowned. The system flagged me for additional verification. Same red band. Same waiting. The bus left without me. By midnight, the temporary order had been served electronically. The language was flat. No accusations. Just conditions. Conditions are facts once they exist. I sat on the steps outside the station, watching routes cycle on the board. Every path required clearance I didn't have or money I couldn't move. The model I'd been holding was wrong. I thought this was about proving who I was. It was about where I was allowed to be while the system decided. And the system had already placed me. The night compressed. Deadlines stacked closer than sleep. At 6:30 the next morning, my sister called. She'd spoken to a legal aid hotline. They said an emergency motion could pause enforcement if filed before noon. Pause meant custody wouldn't transfer yet. It sounded like a hinge. The motion required one thing. Proof that my travel restriction was under active review. Not clearance. Review. I called the clearance line again. I didn't explain the story. I asked for documentation. The agent said she could issue a status letter confirming my case was pending. Pending was enough. She emailed it while I stayed on the line. The letter arrived as a PDF. Official seal. Neutral language. It said my profile was undergoing verification and that movement restrictions were administrative, not punitive. That sentence looked like a door. I forwarded it to the legal aid contact. They responded fast. They could file, but they needed a wet signature. Not digital. What meant paper? Paper meant distance. The escalation tightened. My sister offered to drive the document to me. She was 90 minutes away. Traffic could break it. Noon was 4 hours out. While we coordinated, another email landed. From the clearance office. Subject unchanged. Inside, one paragraph said my case had been reclassified due to external legal relevance. Reclassified meant higher scrutiny. Higher scrutiny meant longer. I called immediately. The agent said the letter was still valid but warned it might be superseded. Superseded meant revoked without notice. At 10:45 my sister arrived. We printed the motion at a copy shop. The clerk asked for ID to release the prints. The scanner flagged me again. Same red band. He said company policy required a supervisor. The supervisor took 10 minutes and a phone call. The clock didn't slow. I signed. My sister ran the papers back to her car to file electronically from her laptop. She hit submit at 11:58. 2 minutes under. The confirmation email came through. Motion received. Review scheduled. Not granted. Scheduled. That felt like the second pause. Stronger. Legal. If the judge granted it, everything would hold. If not, at 12:04, my phone buzzed. Clearance office again. Short message. Please disregard prior status letter. Case requires in-person verification before any attestations. At 12:06, the court docket updated. Motion under consideration. No stay issued yet. The promise of a pause existed on paper for exactly 8 minutes. I watched the docket refresh and the inbox stay silent, knowing both systems were deciding in parallel and neither was waiting for the other. I folded the signed copy back into my bag, even though it was already filed. There was nothing left to submit. Only outcomes left to arrive. At 12:40, I walked back to the airport. Not to fly. To the office I'd been told didn't exist. I asked for the emergency desk and slid the receipt with the case number under the glass. I added the court docket printout and the revoked letter. No explanation. Just sequence. The supervisor didn't argue. She scanned everything and made one call I couldn't hear. Then she handed me a form marked sworn statement and pointed to the line. I signed. The effect was immediate. An internal hold fired upward instead of outward. Movement restrictions converted to investigative flags. The system stopped treating me as a subject and started treating the process as evidence. By 2:15, an internal bulletin went out. Automated matches from that registry were suspended system-wide. Checkpoints stopped clearing passengers. Secondary lines filled. Flights began holding at gates because clearance confirmations were no longer returning. All downstream actions tied to it froze in place. The registry itself locked, not for repair, but for evidence capture. What had constrained me now constrained everything that depended on it. Within minutes, the effect became visible beyond the office. Departure boards stalled. Gate agents switched to manual document checks. Lines stretched past security because the system that normally answered in seconds was now silent. An advisory went out to airports explaining that automated clearance was offline pending regulatory review triggered by a single case file. The clearance office called. Different tone. They asked me to remain available. The court docket updated minutes later. Stay granted pending review. Custody transfer paused. The price followed anyway. The judge ordered supervised exchanges until resolution. Travel remained restricted by my own choice now. Counsel invoices arrived before relief settled. My ex didn't message back. She didn't have to. That evening, a notice hit the agency's site. Internal Controls Review announced after a registry failure forced nationwide manual clearance procedures. Intake from the registry paused indefinitely. The red band cleared from my name. It stayed on the registry that put it there. I went home and put the receipt in a drawer. The number on it no longer connected to anything. I sat in the quiet and waited for nothing else to arrive.